In this video, we will continue building out our carrier delays table, which is going to allow us to assess variation in the delays experienced by the different carriers flying out of Chicago. For the next few formulas we're going to create, we're going to be taking advantage of the COUNTIF family of functions built into Excel. These functions allow you to specify criteria in order to identify subsets of the data and then perform mathematical operations on those subsets of data. In this video, we're going to create two formulas. The first formula, which we are going to populate in column C, so I am going to click on cell C1 and add a column heading, is going to be the overall count of the number of flights that each carrier flew out of Chicago. In column D, we are going to be creating a formula that counts only the delayed flights. So the column heading I'm going to type in cell D1 is the number of delayed flights. Hit enter, and that column heading is a bit wider than the actual width of the column, so I'm going to double click on the right edge of column D to auto fit that selection. Before we start building the formulas, there's one thing that we need to do that I neglected to do in a previous video, and that is create a range name for the unique carrier column over in the flight data table. So let's navigate over to the flight data worksheet and then find the unique carrier column, which is column C. And we will start by selecting all of the data in the unique carrier column in our data table. So hover over the unique carrier column heading till you see the downward pointing black arrow, left click, select that data, click up in the name box in the upper left hand corner and give the range the same name as the column heading, so unique carrier. Hit enter. And to double check our work, I'm already on the formulas tab in the ribbon, but if you're not, select the formulas tab, then click on the name manager button, and then scan down through your list of range names to find the unique carrier range name. Now, we've got two objects in here that are named very similarly. We just created unique carrier, which refers to the unique carrier column in the flight data table. But you may remember that in a previous video, we also defined the data table that lives on our unique carriers worksheet as the unique carriers table. That table is not going to come into play in any way with what we're doing. I just want to make sure you're aware that we have two objects named very similarly here so that you make sure that you select the correct one when you're building your formula. So all of this checks out. I'm going to click the close button to close out of the name manager. And now that we've got that range name created, we can navigate back over to the carrier delays worksheet. And now we're ready to start building the formula for the number of flights. The way that we're going to calculate the number of flights is that we are going to count all of the times that the carrier codes that you see over in the code column of the carrier delays table. We're going to count every occurrence of those codes in the unique carriers column over on the flight data table. So let's click in cell C2, type an equal sign, and start typing count. And you can see that there are a variety of count functions in Excel. And use the downward arrow to select the COUNTIF function and then hit tab to bring it into my formula. And now we can see the two arguments for that function. In the first argument, we need to specify the range that contains the values we want counted. That is the unique carrier column. So I'm just going to start typing unique carrier. Select it from the list, hit tab to move it into our formula, type a comma to advance to the second argument, and in the second argument we're going to specify our criteria. Well, the criteria that we want to use are the code values that you see over in the code column of this table. So I'm going to click in cell A2 to specify the criteria, and then type my closing parenthesis. That completes this formula. And let's hit enter. And now you can see the number of flights that each carrier flew out of Chicago in January of 2017. Now let's move over to cell D2 and populate the delayed flights column. Here we're going to be using two criteria, and because we have more than one criteria, instead of using the COUNTIF singular function, we will be using the COUNTIFs plural function. So let's start by typing our equal sign and then count, and this time we will go to the bottom of the list and tab COUNTIFs into our formula. The structure of the function is largely the same as what we just saw with COUNTIF, although if you look down at the explanation of the function, you'll see those ellipses at the right-hand side. What those ellipses indicate is that you can specify an undefined number of criteria ranges and criteria in this function. I'm sure there is some upper limit on the number of ranges that you can use, but I don't know offhand what that is, and we aren't going to be anywhere close to it because we only have two criteria. The first criteria for this is exactly what we just did with number of flights. We want to count the number of times that the airline codes in column A occur in the unique carrier column in the flight data. So I'm going to select the unique carrier range name, hit tab to move that into our formula, type a comma to advance to the criteria argument, click in cell A2 to point it toward our criteria, hit the comma again, and now we need to specify our second criteria range. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use the actual delay column to limit the count to only the flights that experienced a delay. I'm going to begin typing actual. Once the results are limited to the actual delay range name, I'm going to hit tab to move that into our formula, and then I'm going to type a comma to advance to the criteria specification argument. Now the syntax for this is a little weird, and there are a couple of different ways that we can handle this. The way we're going to handle it is to just say, I want you to look at the actual delay column, and anytime that a value is greater than 0, then I want you to count it. And the way that you specify that here in this criteria argument is you type an open quote, a greater than sign, the number 0, and a close quote. And then we'll type a closing parenthesis to complete the formula. Let's hit enter. And now you can see the number of flights for each carrier that experienced delays. That's where we're going to wrap up in this video, but in future videos we'll be adding some additional summary statistics for each of these carriers to the table to help us with our analysis.